On June 25, 1876, George Armstrong Custer embarked on what would be his final charge into battle. At the banks of the Little Bighorn River, he confronted an overwhelming force of Lakota and Northern Cheyenne warriors. As dusk enveloped the battlefield, Custer and his troops faced utter annihilation. It was not until 2 days later, when General Terry arrived on the scene, that the chilling realization struck the surviving soldiers. Their commander had perished in the brutal confrontation. This devastating news echoed through the ranks, reverberating across the nation and igniting a profound sense of shock. As the United States prepared to celebrate its centennial, the defeat of Custer, an iconic military figure, at the hands of those pejoratively labeled as savages, forced a reckoning with the nation's own narratives. The reverberations of this defeat led to swift military actions. In the ensuing months, the Great Sioux War came to a close, with leaders such as Wooden Leg, a prominent Cheyenne warrior, forced onto reservations. Yet, what transpired after the smoke cleared at Little Bighorn? How did the Northern Cheyenne eventually lay down their arms? And what fate awaited Wooden Leg in the tumultuous years to come? The answers to these questions are as unexpected as they are illuminating. By late July 1876, as the beleaguered troops on Reno Hill continued their desperate fight for survival, a column of soldiers appeared on the horizon. Led by General Terry and Colonel Gibbon, these reinforcements prompted mixed reactions among the younger Cheyenne warriors. Some urged an immediate attack, while others advocated for caution. Ultimately, the wise counsel of Sitting Bull prevailed, and further assaults were called off. That night, the largest known assembly of Native Americans began to move once again, with Wooden Leg and the Northern Cheyenne at the forefront. Over the following days, they traversed the Little Bighorn Valley, their movements marked by a desperate search for sustenance. Food was scarce, and while Wooden Leg and other hunters ventured far from the main group, they could only procure meager supplies. Consequently, the decision was made to split into smaller parties, increasing their chances of finding food. Confident in their recent triumph on the greasy grass, as they called the battlefield, the Cheyenne were not overly concerned about the soldiers trailing behind them. Reflecting on their journey, Wooden Leg later recounted, "We made our way up the Powder River, camping and hunting all along its course, far above the junctions of the Powder and the Little Powder. We ventured over the Tongue River to the upper Rosebud and upper Little Bighorn branches, finding ample game and abundant grass for our horses. Thus the Northern Cheyenne spent the summer living in harmony with nature, drawing sustenance from the land." For those intrigued by Cheyenne life, Wooden Leg's memoir provides a rare, first-hand glimpse into their culture. Born into a world of freedom as a Cheyenne, he joined the Elk Warrior Society at a mere 14 years of age, following in the footsteps of his father. The Cheyenne were home to various warrior societies, including the Crazy Dog and Fox Warriors, each tasked with not only defending their people, but also maintaining order within the tribe. These groups managed village relocations and had the authority to enact corporal punishment to preserve discipline. However, the killing of a fellow Cheyenne was strictly prohibited and could lead to exile. While this code of conduct may appear harsh, it was essential for the survival of the Cheyenne, who needed to mobilize swiftly in the face of threats. The distinction between life and death often hinged on their ability to act decisively. The Cheyenne's diet relied heavily on buffalo, but Wooden Leg harbored a preference for antelope meat. They also hunted elk, deer, and even bears, rabbits, fish, and beavers. During times of scarcity, the Cheyenne sometimes resorted to consuming dogs or wolves, though Wooden Leg himself did not favor their taste. The methods of survival were equally resourceful. Fire was kindled using steel and flint, with buffalo chips often serving as fuel. Burial customs set the Northern Cheyenne apart from other tribes. Rather than employing scaffolds, they interred their dead in hillside crags or caves. When such locations were unavailable, bodies were placed on the ground, covered with stones, and positioned away from common pathways. Marriages were informal, established through mutual agreement. While polygamy was practiced, often involving sisters as co-wives to mitigate jealousy, infidelity carried no social penalties, and either spouse could initiate divorce. Surprisingly, Wooden Leg noted that suicide was not uncommon among the Cheyenne, with men sometimes resorting to self-inflicted gunshot wounds and women opting for hanging. A young Wooden Leg encountered the lifeless body of a girl who had hanged herself, while his own aunt attempted suicide but was saved by his mother. At the age of 16, Wooden Leg embarked on his first raid against the Shoshone, where he witnessed the fierce resistance of an elderly Shoshone warrior who killed 2 Cheyenne before being ultimately subdued. The brutality that ensued, with the Shoshone's body desecrated, left an indelible mark on Wooden Leg's consciousness. By the age of 17, Wooden Leg began to seek spiritual guidance through medicine, fasting, and meditating for 4 days to express gratitude and seek blessings. On other occasions, he stood in a creek or lake from sunrise to sunset without sustenance. Fluent in both Lakota and Plain Sign Language, Wooden Leg's experiences illuminate the interconnectedness of the Cheyenne and Lakota. In the aftermath of Little Bighorn, the Northern Cheyenne experienced relative calm, allowing Wooden Leg and 9 companions to conduct a raid against the Crow. Though they encountered no enemies, they revisited the battlefield where Wooden Leg discovered an unopened box of ammunition. Unbeknownst to them, their village had suffered disaster in their absence. A significant force of U.S. soldiers and their Pawnee allies attacked, leading to what is now known as the Battle of Red Fork, or the Dull Knife Fight. Wooden Leg's journey from this point onward would intertwine with the tragic fate of the Northern Cheyenne. On November 25, 1876, approximately 25 miles west of present-day Casey, Wyoming, Colonel Ranald Mackenzie led a brutal assault on the Cheyenne. With around 1,000 soldiers, including several hundred Pawnee scouts, the devastation was severe. Approximately 30 Cheyenne were killed, but the greater loss was in their horses, lodges, and essential supplies during their chaotic escape. This scene echoed the earlier Battle of the Powder River, where they had faced similar loss. The aftermath left Wooden Leg and his fellow warriors in shock, struggling to recognize their people amid the destruction. Once again, the Cheyenne sought refuge among their long-standing allies, the Lakota. The Oglalas, in particular, extended tremendous generosity, sharing food, blankets, and even tobacco and horses. Wooden Leg recalls, "Every married woman received skins to make some form of shelter, and no Cheyenne was allowed to go hungry or cold that night." This bond between the Cheyenne and Lakota allowed the former to regain a semblance of normalcy, at least temporarily. For nearly a month, the Cheyenne remained with the Sioux, yet by January 1877, they resolved to separate. However, the soldiers were never far behind. Led by Colonel Nelson A. Miles, the ensuing Battle of Wolf Mountain did not decisively favor either side, but was perceived as a strategic victory for the U.S. Army. In the bitter winter, the soldiers proved capable of striking effectively, even under harsh conditions. Wooden Leg fought alongside Crazy Horse in counterattacks, but amid the chaos, he received distressing news. His sister, Crooked Nose, had been captured by the Bluecoats. 4 Cheyenne women and 5 children were taken prisoner, leaving Wooden Leg and his people with few options. Ultimately, the Cheyenne and Lakota parted ways, as planned, with the Cheyenne retreating to the upper Little Bighorn for the remainder of winter, striving to live off the land and gradually replenish their resources. Despite their efforts to maintain their way of life, winter brought little respite. Soldiers continued their relentless pursuit, and the Cheyennes' isolation deepened. As spring approached, 2 visitors arrived, one half Sioux, the other an elderly woman named Sweet Woman, who had been captured alongside Crooked Nose. They bore messages from the soldiers, assuring the captives were well cared for and promising that if the Cheyenne surrendered, there would be no retribution for past conflicts. They offered food, blankets, and safety as incentives. A council convened, but the Cheyenne hesitated to make a definitive choice. Gradually, they began moving toward Fort Keogh, where their prisoners, including Crooked Nose, were held. As they approached, they dispatched a few chiefs ahead to assess the situation, hopeful that the path would be safe for the rest of the tribe to follow. Tragically, the reunion took a heartbreaking turn. Crooked Nose had initially rejoiced upon seeing the chiefs, but her mood darkened after their departure. Fearing she might never reunite with her family, she retrieved a concealed revolver, ironically, a gift from Wooden Leg months earlier, and took her own life. The chiefs received the devastating news shortly after, and it reverberated through Wooden Leg's heart, leaving him shattered by the loss of his sister. Despite this tragedy, the Cheyenne camped along the Powder River, where more of their allied brethren joined them, reinforcing the momentum towards surrender. It became clear that no one would face punishment for their involvement in battles against Custer or other U.S. forces. Little Wolf, a highly regarded leader alongside several other chiefs, chose to surrender. A sacred buffalo head and the medicine lodge were presented to Little Wolf's group, compelling Wooden Leg's family to follow suit. However, Wooden Leg himself was not yet prepared to relinquish his freedom. Instead, he joined a small band of around 30 Cheyenne under Last Bull's leadership. They roamed the upper Powder and Tongue rivers, hunting where they could, while evading soldiers and rival tribes such as the Crows and Shoshones. Life remained perilous, with food scarce and constant vigilance required. Nevertheless, they managed to survive, often dispatching scouts to monitor conditions at the White River Agency. When the scouts returned with favorable reports, assurances of good treatment, no repercussions for past conflicts, and abundant supplies, just as promised at Fort Keogh, Wooden Leg and his band ultimately resolved it was time to surrender. The White River Agency, later known as the Red Cloud Agency, had shifted locations multiple times before becoming the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota, where it stands today. In 1877, however, it was located near Fort Robinson in present-day Nebraska, where Wooden Leg and his fellow Cheyennes surrendered, joining those who had yielded earlier. Initially, the surrender appeared to proceed without incident. Although the Cheyenne were required to relinquish their weapons, they received the promised provisions, clothing, and even a small amount of cash. Yet, this fleeting peace was shattered when the entire Northern Cheyenne population at the agency was ordered to relocate hundreds of miles to Indian Territory, what is now Oklahoma. Wooden Leg described his people's bitter disappointment. "We had understood that when we surrendered, we would stay on our White River Reservation. We gave up our guns and our horses because of that promise, but now we were being forced to leave." Just 3 days after what they believed was the conclusion of their journey, the Cheyenne found themselves on the move again, this time toward Oklahoma, where conditions would prove far harsher than anticipated. Their new life in Indian Territory was fraught with challenges, and the promises of peace and stability quickly faded. This narrative mirrors the experiences of many tribes during this turbulent era. The Cheyenne, like others, faced dire circumstances as promised supplies failed to materialize. Hunger spread relentlessly, and illness struck mercilessly. The conditions became so unbearable that Chief Skullknife and Little Wolf, unable to endure it any longer, boldly resolved to leave. They declared, "The soldiers may kill us all, but they cannot force us to stay in this land." Thus they led half of the Northern Cheyenne on a daring exodus, a remarkable episode in its own right, albeit not part of Wooden Leg's tale, as he chose to remain behind in Indian Territory with his family. The exodus was significant, involving approximately 300 Cheyenne, and several confrontations ensued, resulting in the loss of around 50 Cheyenne lives, alongside 30 soldiers and civilians. Despite the heavy toll, the Northern Cheyenne were not returned to Oklahoma. Instead, they secured a new home on what became the Northern Cheyenne Indian Reservation in southeastern Montana, providing sanctuary for many who had escaped, while others made their way to the Pine Ridge Reservation. Meanwhile, back in Oklahoma, the conditions Wooden Leg and his people faced only worsened. Wooden Leg lamented, "Our people died, and kept dying, one after the other." Among those lost was his father, White Buffalo. After enduring 6 long years in exile, Wooden Leg and the remaining Cheyenne were finally offered the chance to rejoin their kin up north. By this time, Wooden Leg had married a Southern Cheyenne woman, and alongside his mother and siblings, they embarked on the arduous journey to Montana. Upon arrival, Wooden Leg took on a new and ironic role, serving as a scout for the very army that had once been his adversary, stationed at Fort Keogh. To Wooden Leg's dismay, one of his assignments involved pursuing the Miniconjou Lakota chief, Spotted Elk, known as Bigfoot, during the winter of 1890. Tragically, this meant he was present during the infamous massacre at Wounded Knee. History, as is often the case, is filled with contradictions. Wooden Leg recounted how the Cheyenne scouts, including himself, were misled. They were told the Sioux were preparing to fight against the Cheyenne in the region, and in a bid to protect their own people, they agreed to assist. Upon reaching Pine Ridge, however, they discovered that it was not the Oglala, but other Sioux groups challenging the white settlers. The Cheyenne, seeking to avoid conflict, quickly found themselves targeted by the Sioux's frustrations. "Our Cheyenne relatives had their lodges torn down and burned by the angry Sioux," Wooden Leg recalled, mourning the internal strife. Though Wooden Leg asserted that neither he nor his Cheyenne companions directly participated in the massacre, they pursued those who fled the scene. He recounted the harrowing aftermath. "We Cheyenne scouts did not engage in any fighting. We were dressed and ready, but held back by the officers while the soldiers carried out the slaughter. Many Sioux fell that day in a small valley just beyond the hill where we stood. Even after the battle concluded, the scouts spent their days searching for any remaining Lakota in the frozen wilderness. We endured long, cold rides, searching for those who had fled." Wooden Leg reflected on those bleak winter months spent in the Badlands. In the years that followed, Wooden Leg's life veered toward domestic stability. He and his wife had 2 daughters, whom they enrolled in a mission school on the Tongue River for a Western education. While the girls attended the school, Wooden Leg and his wife would visit them frequently, bringing them home on weekends. He even built a home on a nearby hill, from which he could watch his children play. However, this period of tranquility was short-lived. Tragedy struck when his younger daughter became gravely ill at the age of 14. Despite their hopes for her recovery, her health deteriorated, leading to her untimely death after they brought her home. Wooden Leg and his wife focused all their love and aspirations on their surviving daughter, but heartbreak visited once more. The elder daughter too succumbed to the same illness, gradually withering away throughout a harsh winter. Neither the remedies of white doctors nor the prayers of Cheyenne healers could save her. As spring approached, she too was laid to rest, leaving Wooden Leg profoundly bereaved. "My heart fell to the ground," he lamented, consumed by grief. In his sorrow, he condemned the boarding school system, believing it ill-suited for Native children deprived of their traditional way of life and proper nourishment. "It is not good sense to make the whites and Indians live by the same rules," he concluded. Despite his personal losses, Wooden Leg lived a long life marked by remarkable achievements. He earned a pension for his service as a scout and eventually became a tribal judge. His income from these positions allowed him not only to provide for his family, but also to assist other less fortunate members of his tribe. "We few are the rich men among our people," he once said, although his wealth was measured not solely in monetary terms, but by his ability to care for others. Even as time passed and circumstances shifted, he he remained deeply connected to his roots. He attended a large gathering at the Little Bighorn battlefield 30 years after the fateful conflict, but declined to participate in the 50-year reunion in 1926, stating, "I will not go where I might be asked to shake hands with a crow," revealing wounds that had yet to heal. In 1940, Wooden Leg passed away at the age of 82, just a few years after sharing his life story with historian Thomas Marcus. It is remarkable to reflect on the fact that someone who fought at the Battle of Little Bighorn lived into the 20th century, with individuals still alive today who may have known Wooden Leg as children. This connection to the past serves as a powerful reminder that the history we discuss is not as distant as it may seem. Thus unfolds the story of Wooden Leg, a Northern Cheyenne warrior, scout, and leader. In closing, let us remember that the same creator who shaped both Crazy Horse and Custer does not confine himself to stained glass. May we all take a page from Wooden Leg's book and seek communion with the Great Spirit in whatever manner resonates with us.